Go forth and grow.
Another step on the road less traveled.
I have the doom at the door. You will fail. Starfire.
Hey, Mason here. Here with my day 3 update, or the tier 15 update. I've pushed this character to tier 15s. I can just show you my maps here. So you can see that I have some tier 15 maps, and I managed to push my character to tier 15s, and I'm starting to take on some of the bosses. So in the previous clip, you saw that I killed level 1 Olroth. It was my second time killing him, but I just thought I would record it to have a showcase of me actually killing him, because I didn't have it the first time. In terms of the build's upgrades and the build's changes, several big changes have been made, and I've kind of talked through the process of how I went with deciding these changes. But to first start, I'll just show you the gems, and I'll just talk a little bit about the changes. So first is Flicker Strike. It is now 20 quality, it is now 6 linked. Pinpoint Crit, Perpetual Charge, Close Combat, Hit and Run, Ancestral Core. This is the mapping setup for bossing. I put in Momentum in here, and I put in Ambrosia in here. In case you have never used Ambrosia before, Ambrosia says it consumes 20% of your max mana flask. And you see here, I bought a mana flask with 119 charges. You see, look at the second line that says consumes 10 of 119 charges. The 119 maximum is the only thing that actually matters, and you use that with Ambrosia. What that means is 20% of 119 is like 22, and then you get 3% more damage as extra lightning. Sorry, 3% gained as extra lightning per flask consumed, so you get like 60% extra lightning damage, which is pretty nice. Helps for bosses. In terms of what I use for mapping, it's still Ancestral Core and Hit and Run. Hit and Run is a nice quality of life tool, but you can opt to not use it if you prefer using like Momentum for more damage. But it's just a personal preference, really. And also my Flicker Strike gem is level 19 now. Once I hit level 90, I'll push it to level 20 or level 21, depending on my budget. Probably level 20. Okay. One more thing I will note is that my Flicker Strike is not crit capped, and I will show you once I get to the gem why that's the case, and you will understand why. Okay. Next one is Herald of Thunder. The same setup as before: Ambush, Reach, Armament, Focus. Herald of Thunder with Ambush, 42%, but it should like crit like most of the time. It may be worth actually pushing this to 50%. I will have a think about that. Oh, actually, no, sorry. You'll see later why it actually goes up to 50%. Okay, Charge Staff, level 19. Herald of Thunder is level 17, but you want to push it to as high level as possible as soon as you can. Charge Staff is still the same. Innovate, Shock, Duration, Shock Conduction. And Charge Staff has like a 42% chance to crit. But again, it'll be explained later. Reaper Invocation. So I've actually dropped Cast on Crit. Before, I'll go into Reaper Invocation and Charge Regulation in a second. But we'll just go through the other remaining gems. So Profane Ritual is the same. Unleash, Overabundance. This one is level 1. You want this to be level 1 only for the last line, which is less skill effect duration, which means that the little circles, like the circles, these things come to you quicker and give you your power charges quicker. It's just quality of life. For rapid casting and charge profusion. If you want to use the Reaper Invocation setup with charge regulation, you need charge profusion too. Next one is Infernal Cry, still the same. Raging Cry, cooldown recovery. Stormwave is also the same. Upheaval, Rage 3, Elemental, Armament 2, and Innovate. Sacrifice is the same, level 14. Activated on both sets. And now I'll talk about the change. So previous video, I was running Cast on Crit. Cast on Crit is a very standard Flicker setup that has been tested multiple times in previous leaks. And so I kind of went with that by default. You see my custom crit is here because that's kind of what I used last league. But on my SSF character last league, I ran the amulet. Where is the amulet? I forgot where I put it. But I ran the amulet that gave you a power charge. I think it was Serpent's Egg. Is it not? This amulet here. You gain a charge when you gain an additional charge. This one here. Don't get the corrupted one. Gain an additional charge when you gain a charge. This in combination with custom crit allowed me to basically sustain my Flicker Strike permanently. However, I've found that quite difficult to do without that amulet. And because you're playing Hollow Palm, your scaling damage is very limited. You need physical damage based on skill level. You need to have a high skill level, which means that you really need to have melee skill gems on your amulet for damage. Otherwise, you just can't do enough damage. Like your scaling is from Hollow Palm. You get melee. If you get melee skill levels, you get flat damage from Hollow Palm, and you get melee skill levels on the actual skill itself, which means that you're going to get a double efficiency in terms of damage. So in my opinion, after kind of reviewing, I think that amulet, you can't run that amulet on this build because you're playing Hollow Palm. If you're not playing Hollow Palm and you're playing a normal quarterstaff, you can get enough damage on your quarterstaff itself, either through gem levels, through base crit, and through flat damage on the quarterstaff, that you can ignore having melee skill gems on your amulet. But because you're playing Hollow Palm, you cannot. So this is why I've decided to drop the Serpent's Egg amulet. Because I dropped that, your charge sustain becomes a lot more clunky and a lot worse, and you spend more time using Stormwave instead of actually using Flicker Strike. And the entire point of the build is to play Flicker Strike, right? So I've kind of been looking into ways to get around that, and I've settled on Reaper's Invocation. What this skill gem actually does, I'm not sure if many people have used this before, but when you kill an enemy with a melee attack, so Stormwave is melee, and Flicker Strike is melee, and this is also melee. Oh, sorry, this is not melee, but Stormwave and Flicker Strike are both melee. You get energy onto the skill. It stacks up energy, and basically you press it, and it will multicast whatever skills that's linked into it, and that will allow you to cast the skill multiple times. I'm just gonna quickly open a map, and I'll just show you this quickly. I'm gonna pick some random map, pick some location that has no. So when I kill stuff with my Reaper Invocation, it will get like a number next to it on my hotbar, and then when I press it, it will cast what do you call it? It will cast the linked skill, which is Profane Ritual. So in this case, it's Profane Ritual, Charge Profusion, Compressed Duration, and Overabundance. And it will cast it multiple times on corpses in the map. So right now, you see I've got a 5 here. This means it will cast the linked skill, Profane Ritual, 5 times. And for each ritual, I will have an additional chance to get a charge, and an additional chance to get a random charge. And this will make it so that the ritual finishes faster, as well as this one, and it will come to me really quick. So watch, when I press it, I'm gonna press it now. So it casts a lot of it, and it will come to me like basically instantly. And my power charges are full again at max. So what does this allow me to do is, one, it allows me to remove the clunkiness from cast on crit, because when you cast on crit, sometimes you just don't get enough charges. And it's mainly when you are not hitting rares. If you're hitting rares, you will get enough charges, but if you're not hitting rares, cast on crit basically gets no energy, and you won't be able to sustain 7 power charges for your Flicker Strike as soon as you finish your Flicker Strike previously. This setup allows you to do it as long as you press Reaper's Invocation after your Flicker Strike. So if I'm just gonna flicker now, and then I'm gonna press it, and then my charges come to me, and then I can go again. So they just like didn't hit anything, because it's like Flicker Strike sometimes kind of goofy, but you go again, then I press it again, get all my charges back, and I can go again if I don't get stunned. So like that, go again, press all my charges, get them back, 3 charges this time, not that many. Press all my charges, back to 7 again, and then try and go again once I moved enough. And then press all my charges, you can see, back to 6 power charges, go again, and then rinse and repeat. So the amount of times you can flicker with this setup is just like way more, and all you're doing is you're pressing an extra button at the end of your flicker to consume nearby corpses. Oh, game froze. But yeah, so in my opinion, this is superior because we do not have Serpent's Egg Amulet, and the reason why we don't have it is because we need melee skill gems to help scale our damage higher because of the way Hollow Palm scales. So yeah, that kind of is the key change that has been kind of added to this. And another kind of tech I discovered while doing this, I'm just going to run away from the mobs quickly, is that because you're gaining so many charges in such a short period of time through the use of the Reaper's Invocation, it allows you to abuse this new support gem, which says you get an additional charge, but you also gain an additional chance for a random charge. This will allow me to just randomly get frenzy charges right here and endurance charges. I'll just see if I can try and fish one out. It's just RNG, right? So you randomly when you're mapping, you get frenzy, you get endurance, and that will kind of be used in charge regulation. One more thing to note is that this is actually 30 spirit, which is very, very cheap because cast on crit is like 100. So you have 30 spirit here, and I have 30 spirit here, and I'm using supports here to cut the rest of my spirit. But this makes the entry level for the build in terms of spirit requirement much, much lower. You can see that you only need like 150 spirit in order to use this setup. I'm just using these supports to kind of fill out the rest of my spirit because I might as well use it, right? I have all of it. Okay, so this Charge Profusion 2 leads into charge regulation. Charge regulation says it consumes a charge every few seconds. In my case, it's every 12 seconds because I have quality. It's 10 seconds plus 2.4. And whenever it consumes a charge, it gives you a bonus, right? So it gives me 26% more crit chance when I have a power charge, which I basically always have, right? Because I'm generating my power charges with Profane Ritual and Reaper Invocation. It gives me 20% more defense when you have an endurance charge, which ends up being 20% like more ES, which gives me a ton of ES. It gives me 15% more skill speed when you have a frenzy charge, and this is just quality of life. It just makes you go really, really fast. And this is kind of why I decided to swap to this setup. Because of the way Reaper Invocation works, after I press it, it gives me 5 stacks, and then all of these become charges. And this, I also get random charges, which would then help work with charge regulation and allow me to gain most of the time. I think power charge is 100% uptime, more or less. Occasionally on bosses, it will drop, but you just have to make sure that it's up before you flicker. And then the defense and the frenzy is basically permanently up, as long as you're constantly flickering and then using Reapers to gain power charges and rinsing and repeating. So this setup ends up gaining a ton more crit, a ton more defenses and skill speed, while still maintaining the kind of confidence of one button flicker. In this case, it's not one button anymore. It is technically 2 buttons because you're using Reaper's Invocation. But in my eyes, it's not a big deal because compared to with the other setup, it's a lot more clunky with the castle crit setup. Okay. That mainly covers the core change on the build. While we are talking about invocations, I will just talk about this particular new node here. This thing is really bad for this build. Basically, what happens is you stack up your invocations, and then you press it, and then it will constantly trigger the skill linked every 2 seconds after, until it runs out of charges. So in my case, it will be 5 charges. If I click this Keystone, I'd press it, and it'll give me Profane Ritual once every 2 seconds. So Ritual, and then it'll wait 2 seconds, and then it'll Ritual again, and then it'll wait 2 seconds, and it'll rinse and repeat. It's not terrible for this build, but there is some auto-bombing kind of potential here, I think. But I'll probably look into it for another build, not for this build. It's not very good for generating a bulk amount of frenzy charges as soon as possible. Power charges with 1 button as soon as I can. Okay, I'm just gonna leave this map now. And then I'll talk a little bit about the gear and the skill tree changes. So let's go on the gear now. This helmet, I showed this before. It is fire, lightning res, and then just high ES. You craft it using, I think I talked about this in the previous video, so you can go check that out on how to craft that. This ring, I think, was the same as the one in the previous video, same as this one in the previous video. This one here, I bought just a blue amulet with the melee skill gems. And then I think I orged it. Yeah, I used like a greater org on it. And then I used an essence for a resistance. But then I screwed this craft up because I used the global defenses essence.
What's new?
So the global defenses essence is this one here. It will remove a mod and then guarantee the increased global defenses. And in my case, you need to make sure that both the prefixes and suffixes are full before you apply this, because then it's guaranteed to remove a prefix and add this in the prefix because the global defenses is a prefix. But I thought it would just work, and I screwed the craft up, and I ended up losing the resistance I got from my essence. So don't be like me. Basically, this one was badly crafted. it was +3 melee skill gems. The way you craft this is you get melee skill gems as blue. You would aug with a perfect or a greater aug, and then you would use an essence to get a res, and then you would probably just exalt. So you'd desecrate for a suffix using the omen. Using this omen here, you would use apply the desecration to it, and then you would re-roll it with the omen that allows you to re-roll, which in this case is this one here. You'd use this. It's pretty expensive, but you'd use this to make sure that you actually get a good mod, and you want to pick a good suffix, whatever you think is suitable, and then you would exalt out the rest of them, and then you would finally at the very end apply the essence on the top line here. Ideally, you buy one with melee skill gems and one with a good prefix like flat energy shield or something like that. In my case, it's just kind of whatever. It just has melee skill gems and global defenses, and the rest of the mods are kind of just like whatever. The rarity is fine, right? It's nice to have. This chest was an upgrade that I did. In my case, it is actually the same amount of ES as my previous chest. I'm not sure if my previous chest is still selling. Might be one of this one. Oh yeah, it's this one here. My previous chest is still selling. I'm going to lower the price because it's not really selling. But it has 950 and 360 with life, 1 res, deflection, and bleeding. The main difference with this one is that this one has triple res, cold res, fire res, and fire and chaos res. So it's got an absolute crazy ton of res. And I also corrupted it for fun, and I got triple socket, which means that its ES value is good enough to compete with my old one. So which my old one didn't have any res, right? And I don't think the deflection is worth that much. So I ended up using this one to help finish and help cap my res. Crafting method is the same as this one over here. Next thing is my gloves. These are the same. These are level 36, by the way. So I've been using this since campaign and haven't found better gloves. So just keep that in mind. These are my boots. They are slightly better than my previous one. I think these were my previous ones. Yep, these were my previous ones. Lightning, so decent ES, lightning and chaos res. I actually corrupted these and they bricked. That's why they're in here now. But this one is just high ES and then a res, and I have the rarity, which is nice, but mainly the movement speed. That's the thing that actually matters. And then these, I'm using a freeze, stun, and slow charm. In my offhand, I'm actually using this new wand. It says it will be ignored, but when I swap, all these points here are int points, which gives me enough int to use the wand. But it just makes it so that it doesn't has a chance to not destroy the corpse when consuming them, which means sometimes when I profane ritual on my skeletons, they won't die. So in that case, they died, but occasionally they will like live the profane ritual and they'll still give me a charge. The scepter was just like absolute dog shit, like absolute random scepter I picked off the floor. Only thing that matters is this line here for the skeletal warriors. Okay, that covers it for the skills. Sorry, for the gear. Talk a bit about the passive tree now. So previously, I was using these days notables here, this one here and this one up here. I decided that I don't think it's like that worth it to use because it was consuming a lot of points, and instead, I have moved my points into like attack damage here, and gone over here to grab all these ES nodes, and all the way down here to grab these ES nodes here. I'm also pathing up to grab this node here, and this is in preparation for when I get my 4th ascendancy. I'll immediately click Chaos Inoculation, and the reason why I need to wait until my 4th ascendancy is because I need Meditate here. There is no reliable source or regen for ES nowadays, so Meditate will help channel. It will force my energy shield to channel, and it will allow me to. It won't double, but it's 1.5x my energy shield. So this is basically on-demand energy shield regen. It's very, very important because without it, it's very hard to actually sustain your energy shield pool. But Flicker Strike actually moves really fast, and mobs will just miss you because they just can't track your character, which is kind of funny. But that's also an advantage of that. Oh, one more thing. Before I forget. Actually, I think that mostly covers it for the skill tree. I'll just finish the skill tree up. I'm taking these two here for crit damage. And I'm also anointing this node here for crit damage. That's just it. It's just more crit damage. It's on my amulet. It's pretty cheap too. And the mana doesn't really matter because you're using Walk of the Wind to get your mana back. So you're very, very healthy in terms of mana. Okay, so before I forget, okay, a bit of a cut there. Before I forget, regarding Flicker Strike's crit, my Flicker Strike says only 82% crit, and you need to have 100% crit, because if the first Flicker Strike hit crits, the rest of them crit. If the first one doesn't crit, the rest of them don't crit. So you need to make sure that this is critting. The way I'm actually achieving this is through charge regulation. Because I'm getting 26% more crit chance when I have a power charge, when I actually use my skeletons to get my power charges, you'll see that when I swap back to my main weapon set, you actually see that my Flicker Strike will actually have guaranteed crit. You see 100% crit chance. And same, my Herald of Thunder will have 53% and then 100% against full life enemies. And my charge stuff will also go up in crit. So that's how I'm capping my crit now. The way you balance this out is you go on your skill tree. There's crit nodes here. You see, I dropped these crit nodes here. This was the main thing I dropped. But obviously, this will depend on how much ES you have on your gear. So what you do is you open up your Flicker Strike menu, you click here, you look how much crit you have. And then in my case, because I'm using charge regulation, I consume the charges first. And then I swap back to my weapon set. And then I check how much crit I have. And then I basically just click nodes on here and I just check my crit, and then click nodes on here and check my crit, because we don't have POB to calc this for us. But that's basically how you do it. In my end, with this node here and these 3 nodes here and the rest of the standard set, that was enough for me to cap my crit. Okay, now I'm just going to talk a little bit about upgrade paths and kind of progression, what I actually did. I'm just going to make a list here. I have a list written down. I'll just read it out. The first thing I did was I got my third ascendancy, and my third ascendancy went into this node right here. And then I dropped the days notables for just increased damage on my tree and more ES, so that I have a very nice and big hit pool so I don't die. You will still die when your energy shield goes down, because there's very unreliable energy shield regen at the moment. So just keep that in mind before you get meditate over here. On that point, I would only recommend transitioning to Chaos Inoculation when you have meditate. This one right here, because it's basically mandatory to sustain your ES. Right now, you can still use your life flask to help with your life. In terms of links, I ended up dropping Lightning Infuse, Lightning Attunement it's called, because I noticed that close combat is just better. And if you kill the mobs, they will be shocked by by charge staff anyways, so they will still proc Herald of Thunder pretty consistently. I haven't had any big issues with that. Again, for mapping, Ancestral Core, Hit and Run for quality of life, for bossing, Momentum, Ambrosia for maximum damage. If you're using Ambrosia, make sure your flask has as many charges as you can. The maximum is like 126 or something like that, or maybe like 130. I'm not sure if you can go up that high, but you want to push as high numbers on this as you possibly can, on this flask. And previously, I talked about the Reaper Invocation and the charge regulation changes, and that's just because we want to drop Serpent's Egg to get more damage. Otherwise, Hollow Palm damage is very hard to scale elsewise, so you can't really lock your amulet slot into Serpent's Egg. Talking about that, I also ended up trying ThunderFist. If you're not sure what ThunderFist does, I'll just pull up the item here in the in-game search menu. ThunderFist makes it so that you get flat lightning here, you get flat crit here, and you get this thing called Crackling Palm, which I'm not sure if it's going to show here. It looks like it's not going to show. But I'll put up a video on screen in the edit. But basically, it adds a skill that applies damage when you punch something. And this application of damage has a damage roll of up to 380 something, I think it was. This is not very good. The reason why it is not very good, after I checked the damage and after I tested it in game against bosses a few times, is mainly because the hit damage is not added flat onto your fists. It's just a skill like Herald of Thunder, where Herald of Thunder does, you can see here the bolt damage, it will do up to 1,200 damage. The ThunderFist line is the same as this. It's like a hit damage that applies all the time when you punch, but it doesn't actually add flat to your fist. So you actually don't end up doing more damage. You end up hitting twice, but the damage from the ThunderFist itself, the Crackling Palm part, is not very good compared to Melee Skill Gems. The reason why Melee Skill Gems is so much more damage, I would say it's like probably, it's enough damage for me to not want to use ThunderFist, and I ended up reselling my ThunderFist that I bought for 7 Divine. The reason why is because by increasing your melee skills, two things happen. 1, you gain flat from Hollow Palm, and 2 is that you gain percentage damage. This attack damage percentage increases on your Flicker Strike or on your Storm Wave. So you're getting 2 sources of scaling. You're basically double dipping your damage scaling with 1 increase in stat, It's kind of where the term comes from. You increase melee skill gems, you're increasing one stat, but you gain damage from Hollow Palm, physical damage based on skill level, and you gain damage based on the attack percentage on Flicker Strike. This one right here, the 440%. So in the end, ThunderFist is not really worth using. I'm sure there may be cases where it is good, but from my testing with this build, I don't think its damage is better than just using +2 melee skill gems. So that kind of wraps up my ThunderFist thoughts, which is also good because it's quite expensive, so you can just skip out on that unique. It's cool. It's very thematic. I really like it, how it looks and how it looks on the screen, but not really needed. And the Thunder hit is AoE, but you have Herald Thunder for clear anyways, and you also have Ancestral Core, so your AoE is more or less fine for Flicker Strike. Okay. The last thing I will talk is I will probably test Electrocute in Herald Thunder, just an extra support gem or more damage in here. Now that's all to be decided once I get to having a 6-leg in Herald Thunder as well. Okay, that mostly wraps it up for the kind of information part of the guide. Hopefully that checklist makes it straightforward for you to progress. General gist is upgrade your gear. You're looking for high ES, you're looking for resistances, you want to be resistance capped, etc. Then obviously you want some flat on your rings whenever you can get it. You want some leech somewhere in your build, either on your rings or your gloves. A utility flask helps keep you life sustained until you swap to CI with Meditate. You want movement speed on your boots. Obviously you don't have to corrupt to get this gear. I'm just doing this myself because I want to self-craft. And you're just progressing. One thing I will just quickly point out is that gem level is very, very important. So you should make sure that if you're, for example, at a level 17 Flicker Strike, like the gem itself, you want to make sure that it is whatever level you're matching. In my case, 84 is level 19 and level 90 is level 20 gems or 21 gems with corruption. So you want to make sure that this is kind of kept up to date. Otherwise your damage will suck. That's kind of one issue that I noticed, is that without that kind of aspect, your damage will be pretty It won't be the best. But yeah, that kind of wraps it up for the information part. I'm just going to go through a live map showcase, just so people can have an idea of how to play this, because it is a little bit different with the Reaper's Invocation. And I'll talk a little bit about the beginning, and then I will kind of just probably mute myself halfway once I think most of the information has been provided. Alright, so here's with the map showcase. This is the map. This is an easy map. Be fully aware it is easy, on the easier side. The reason why I'm not doing very rippy maps is because without Meditate, to sustain my ES, it can be a little bit squishy, especially when your energy shield is just ran off by flickering to packs and then them hitting you. So that's why I'm using a easier kind of map. I've kind of just been, getting into tier 15s, and then once you get 4th Ascendancy and CI, you should be able to do tier 15s and stay pretty tanky and pretty healthy. Okay, so first thing to do is just check my gems, Hidden Run and Ancestral Core. Cool. I'm going to use my Profane Ritual to gain power charges. Once it's at 7, I'm going to press Charge Stuff and then rinse and repeat. Then, look for a pack, Flicker Strike, and then Reaper's Invocation. And then if I don't get enough charges, I will Profane Ritual between them. But looks like it's mostly enough. So, Reaper's Invocation, charges are back, Flicker Strike again, Reaper's Invocation. Just kill some mobs normally. Just kind of just like how it goes. One thing to note is that because the way Hidden Run works, it says you have to move 10 meters. If occasionally you will get a flicker where you haven't moved 10 meters, like it will just be like the smallest pack ever and you just flicker like this, it may not be active, like you press it and you won't be able to flicker. And so just keep that in mind. Normally I'll just roll back and then just walk a little bit and then you will have Flicker Strike back up again. But yeah, I think that actually mostly wraps it up. The one thing I will just quickly point out to people is if your clear is not very good, the way you solve this is mainly through two things. The first way you solve your clear is make sure you have Ancestral Core in here. And the second thing, you should make sure your Herald damage, your Herald of Thunder damage is pretty high. The easiest way to do this is through 1, 50% crit. So right now you can see that my Charged Infusion is not activated because my crit chance is not 50. So when I get some power charges and I pause the game again, you'll see that my Charged Infusion will be activated because my crit would have gone up, you see, 53%. And same for my Flicker Strike, 100% crit. But the easiest way to do this is 50% crit plus Ambush, which doubles your crit chance when the enemies are on full life. with 460% crit damage, which means that this herald is hitting really hard. And then you're scaling the range on the herald because you want the bolt to hit like a larger area. And then you're also scaling the damage here and the damage here as well. So that's kind of the easiest way to do this. You want to make sure that your Herald of Thunder damage is high. Make sure it can crit, and make sure you're using ambush, because ambush is very efficient because it makes your Herald of Thunder deal like 4 times, 5 times more damage because it's critting. And so that's kind of very important to help with your clear. Another thing is to make sure that your charge staff is properly shocking. So in this case, shock and shock conduction. And this will allow it so that your Herald of Thunder actually procs, because whenever you shock, you have a chance to put shocked ground underneath the enemy. And so that will make sure the enemies you're killing are shocked, which would then give you the bolts from Herald of Thunder if you read how the gem works. And that's kind of the general gist of this. I think that more or less wraps it up for the information in the video. I don't think I'll like talk too much anymore. So I'm going to put myself on mute and just go through the rest of the map until I get to the boss. Just to unmute myself and quickly talk about Expedition. You do not want to click this mod here. Please do not click this, otherwise you'll do absolutely 0 damage. You do not want to click immune to fizz, and you do not want to click immune to lightning. So that's the 3 ones that you don't really care about. The rest of them don't really matter as long as you don't die. So I'm going to click some of these more rippier ones, because like why not? We'll just see how this goes. One thing I normally do when I do Expedition is I will click it to let it explode, and then I'll just run off until all the mobs have spawned. And then once all the mobs have spawned, it will make it easier to chain to all the mobs with Flicker Strike, and you can normally just clear the entire Expedition with 1 button. Otherwise, you have to wait for all the mobs to kind of come between all of them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click this, and I'm just going to run. I'm going to go do the boss, and then once this thing's all spawned, I'll come back and I'll just wipe this with 1 Flicker Strike. For the bosses, in case you haven't played Flicker Strike before, you want to make sure that you use your Infernal Cry before you Flicker Strike, because the buff from an Infernal Cry applies to every single hit from Flicker Strike. And that's how you get a lot of your bossing damage. For mapping, you don't really need these swaps. You can if you want. I don't bother. But just keep in mind that if you do struggle with damage, you should use those swaps. So as before, I'm going to make sure my power charges are maxed. I'm going to hit him until he's shocked. So he's shocked now. I'm going to War Cry, make sure he's enraged, and then just Flicker Strike him. So in that case, it wasn't enough. I'm going to gather some corpses, and then rinse and repeat. War Cry. So he's dead. So now that the expedition is spawned, I'm going to go back and do that once I collect all my charges again. You see that the Reaper's Invocation makes this kind of experience a lot more smoother. But now I've got all my charges. I'm going to walk in. I'm going to just see the first mob and Flicker Strike. In this case, Reaper's Invocation. And rinse and repeat. Okay. Not that many mobs. So that wasn't a big explosion. But generally for expeditions, I do that because it just allows me to blow up the entire pack if they're very close to each other. Cool. That wraps it up for the map showcase. I think the Reaper's Invocation change is much better than using Cast on Crit. It's way more reliable and it only requires one extra button press, which I haven't found to be a big issue at all. So I'm going to keep using it. I think it's better than the previous system. And it's just nicer to play and feels a bit better. But yeah, that wraps it up for the video. That's kind of the main part of the video. I'm going to talk a little bit about like more advanced Flicker stuff and a bit more meta crafting and theory crafting nerd stuff. The main thing I want to talk about is this special gem that they added called this one right here, Garakon's Resolve. Supports attack skills which you use yourself. They can only be used after you've moved a certain distance, but it says they will bifurcate critical hit chance. What this means is it's the same word as fork on Tengu Tongue, if you've ever used that spear. Hits with this weapon will roll their crits twice to determine if they are critical hit, or when determining their crit. If either roll succeeds, the hit will be a crit, and then crit damage will be applied normally. If both rolls succeed, the hit will be a crit, and crit damage will be applied twice. And then this last line is like the critical hit chance lucky stuff. That's like whatever. This is a very good gem for Flicker Strike. The reason why I'm not using it right now is because it's expensive. I think it was like 1 to 2 divine, like in that range. So I don't want to put like a very expensive item in for viewers, basically. But this one is pretty rare. It's not actually that many on the market. And on paper, what it does, so you see my Flicker Strike here. It will be 100% in terms of this value here, right? I'm going to collect my charges. So these are my stats. I'm just going to pause the game with the B button. Okay, so 100% crit chance, 314% crit damage. What this thing does is it will roll my crit twice if both succeed, which I have a 100% chance. It's like rolling and 100% chance to roll twice, where both are 100% chance to succeed. It will apply the crit damage twice. So it will apply, instead of 300, it will apply 600% crit damage bonus, which is timesing my damage by 7 times with the crit. Yeah, so it'll be 100% base plus 600% crit damage, so 7 times, instead of 4 times. You are losing out on a 40% damage support or a 30% damage support, or a 60%. This is less than, it's like 50% damage support. So just keep that in mind. So you're actually not gaining double damage, but you are gaining quite a lot of damage. And I feel like there may be a chance where this gem is needed in order to one-shot tier 4 bosses. But that's something that I have to keep testing and I have to experiment with. So just keep that in mind. Don't go ahead and buy it if you can't afford it. But it's something to keep your eye out on if you would like to play Flicker Strike. The main thing that makes the Flicker Strike probably the most viable build to use this gem is because the moving condition, 20 meters. When you Flicker Strike, you're moving everywhere, so you're meeting this condition just by using the skill, like probably like 70-80% of the time. 20 meters is quite far though, so just keep that in mind. If you compare this to what I'm using, Hit and Run, hit and run is 10 meters, and I've noticed that it's basically like 95% consistent. You'll always be able to flicker strike. But this one is 20 meters, so sometimes you won't be able to flicker strike, so it may be a little bit clunky to use in maps, so just keep that in mind. The next thing was the supports in Invoker's Invocation. Actually, no, I think that's more or less it. Mainly the charge regulation stuff. The next point of theory crafting I want to try and do is dropping pinpoint accuracy. Pinpoint critical, sorry. When I drop this, I go down to 51% crit with my charges. I'm at 64%. This is giving an absolute gigaton of crit, but it has a very bad downside, which is 30% less crit damage bonus. It means like it basically translates to 30% less damage. That's like a pretty rough downside to have, especially since it's 30% damage, right? So you're losing 30% damage by putting this in, but you're also losing 30% damage by just not having a support in the gem. Like you're losing 40% damage if you don't have momentum in this slot. It's like the that term where it's I forgot the term's name, but basically the idea is that the best setup is one that can drop pinpoint, because by dropping pinpoint you're gaining 30% damage, and then you're opening up a support to put like another 30% damage in. In this case, it would be like 40% damage in. So in the end, you're gaining probably close to 50 to 70%, probably not up to 70 that high, but probably 50 to 60% more damage if you can somehow figure out how to drop pinpoint critical, but still keep your crit chance capped. In this case, it's very difficult to cap your crit. I'm not gonna lie. With pinpoint, I'll just show you this. So with pinpoint in, I'm capping. Without, I'm at 64%, right? And this is with charged regulation on. Remember, I'm not taking some of these nodes on the tree, right? So like there's some random like crit nodes that I'm just not taking. For example, this one here, sorry, not this one here. It's mainly just this node up here. These three up here are crit chance nodes I'm not taking. And I'm sure there's some random ones down here. I think this one down here is crit damage, gets full live. Yeah, so it's just random crit nodes, right? And there's also, not to mention, like one over here for warrior, right here, critical strike chance, critical hit chance, and quite a lot of it. If it is possible to cap crit, so I did test with taking this wheel here. If you take out pinpoint and you use charge regulation, you are at 80% crit. If there is a way to cap your crit without pinpoint accuracy, then you will gain an extremely large amount of damage for flicker strike. And that's kind of what I'm thinking is the way I scale this further. Because I have amulet, I have melee skill gems on my gloves and my amulet. So it's like I already have the kind of two main sources of damage. The rest of it's just scaling ES and scaling rings, like flat on rings. And like that's really it, right? Like and level on gem and better supports, like optimized supports kind of thing. But like that's really it. There's not really any like other ways I can personally see right now. Until obviously I have to experiment more. There's always the thought of using a bell. But that's kind of the first kind of my initial impressions and my initial thoughts. That's why I'm going to try and theory craft and try and craft out the maths. What nodes on the tree do you need to take? How much ES do you need to have on your gear in order to cap your crit without using pinpoint and result in putting in like momentum support, which is 40% more damage. So I'm, instead of losing 30% damage here, I'm gaining 30% by taking this out, and then I'm gaining 40% by putting this in. So you gain a massive amount of damage by doing this. So that's kind of my thoughts on how to progress next mathematically and how to get this build to actually kill tier 4 bosses. If you ask me right now, am I confident can this kill tier 4 bosses in one flicker strike? I would say I'm not 100% sure. I'm probably around 60% sure. But if there is a way to take out pinpoint, I'm probably more like 80 to 90% sure that you can probably get there. Without pinpoint, with pinpoint in, it may be a little bit difficult unless you rely on very expensive boss drops like the Prism of Belief flicker strike jewel. That's kind of the only other way I can see of scaling this. So this particular jewel, you want plus levels of flicker strike, and the plus level of flicker strike will be really good because 2, it has the same effect as melee skill gems. It 1 gives you flat from hollow palm technique, and 2 gives you damage from the attack damage percentage getting increased by increasing the level. So yeah, that kind of wraps it up for this video. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe as usual. My next path is 4th Ascendancy, CI, like 6k ES, probably like 7k, 7.5k ES chilling. Continue to farm, scaling more damage, trying to figure out a way to remove pinpoint, and kind of going from there, just like, 6 links and etc., just like standard damage scaling. But yeah, that's kind of the plans. I will make an update. They will probably slow it down. I'm not sure when next update will probably be on Friday, I'm thinking. But that's kind of just the initial thoughts. But yeah, thanks for watching. Appreciate the views and the comments as well. And hope that this guide helps you with getting your character online. And if you have any questions, leave them below. All right, bye.